The last slivers of a bruised tangerine sun bled across the sky, casting long, distorted shadows over Willow Creek Park. A hush had fallen over Maplewood, the kind of deceptive tranquility that often precedes a storm. Or in this case, a horror, the gentle rustle of leaves in the ancient oak canopy, the distant chirping of crickets, and the lazy lapping of the lake against the shore were the only sounds disturbing the twilight. Yet, amidst this dying serenity, something was terribly, terribly wrong. Crouched by the murky edge of the lake, her silhouette a jagged, unnatural shape against the fading light, 15 years old, but appearing far older in the grip of whatever possessed her. Her clothes were caked with mud and damp earth, clinging to her slender frame. Her dark, lank hair, usually pulled back in a messy bun, had escaped its confines and now framed a face smudged with dirt, her wide, unseeing eyes fixed on her trembling hands. They were stained, not just with mud, but with something darker, something coppery, that glistened faintly in the dwindling light. "System error," she whispered, her voice a reedy, broken sound, barely audible above the whisper of the breeze. Her words, fragments of a language only she seemed to understand, spilled from her lips in a disjointed stream. It wasn't right. Had to fix it. Patch the flaw. Her fingers, stiff and clumsy, fumbled with a cheap, mud-encrusted smartphone. The screen flickered, showing the numbers 911, but she struggled to complete the call, her thumb sliding uselessly over the wet glass. Each attempt was met with a low, frustrated growl, like a trapped animal. Her gaze, though fixated on her hands, seemed to pierce through the physical world, lost in some terrifying internal landscape where logic and reality held no sway. Just a few yards away, nestled beneath the gnarled roots of the magnificent old oak, an ancient sentinel that had witnessed countless seasons of joy and sorrow, a small, still form lay. It was Lily Peterson, a mere 7 years old. Her bright, usually bouncy blonde hair was spread out like a fan against the dark earth, dulled and lifeless. Her favorite pink t-shirt, emblazoned with a glittery unicorn, was now crumpled, marred by dirt and disarray. A tiny, well-loved sketchbook, its pages filled with cheerful crayon drawings of flowers and butterflies, lay discarded beside her, its spine broken, its innocent contents scattered. Her small hands, usually grasping a pencil with fierce concentration, were now open and empty, palms facing upwards in a gesture of ultimate surrender. There was an unnerving stillness about her, a profound absence of the vibrant energy that should define a child. Lily was there, and yet she was not. She was a silent, permanent shadow in the fading light. David Chen, a man whose life was dictated by the predictable rhythm of his daily runs, felt the familiar burn in his calves as he rounded the final bend of the Willow Creek Trail. The day had been long, punctuated by the relentless hum of spreadsheets and client calls, and this evening jog was his sacred ritual, a chance to shed the day's anxieties, to feel the cool air against his skin, to witness the quiet beauty of dusk painting the sky. He was almost home, the promise of a hot shower and a good book lulling him into a comfortable reverie. Then he saw it, a figure, hunched by the lakeside, moving strangely. Not a person stretching, or a couple stealing a quiet moment, but something off. David squinted, his brow furrowing. He slowed his pace, curiosity momentarily, overriding his fatigue. It was a girl, he realized, no older than his niece, seemingly talking to herself, wrestling with a phone. His first thought was perhaps she was upset, maybe had a fight with friends. He considered asking if she needed help, then hesitated, respecting what might be a private moment of teenage angst. But then his gaze drifted to the oak tree. There was a splash of pink, unnaturally bright against the darkening earth. A small form. His heart gave a curious lurch, a skip of confusion. Is that a doll? He mumbled to himself, the absurdity of the thought comforting for a fleeting second. But no, the shape was too human, too small, too still. A sickening dread began to crawl up his spine, cold and insistent. He stopped completely, hands on his knees, panting, not from exertion, but from a sudden, inexplicable fear. He pushed himself forward, not running, but walking with a leaden gait. It wasn't a doll. It was a child, and she wasn't moving. The blonde hair, the pink t-shirt, the unnatural angle of the small head, the absolute terrifying stillness. "Oh my God," David breathed, the words barely a whisper, yet they felt like a scream tearing through the fabric of his own reality. He stumbled forward, his legs suddenly weak, his mind refusing to process what his eyes were seeing. The girl by the lake, Sarah, still mumbled, her words forming a distorted backdrop to the horrifying tableau. He saw the smudges on her hands, the vacant stare, and a primal, instinctual alarm bell began to clang wildly in his brain. No! The sound ripped from his throat, raw and guttural, a sound of pure, unadulterated horror and disbelief. It shattered the twilight quiet, echoing across the still water, a desperate, frantic cry that marked the end of innocence for Willow Creek, for Maplewood, and for everyone who would soon bear witness to its tragic echo. He fumbled for his own phone, his fingers shaking so violently he almost dropped it. The 911 operator's calm voice on the other end felt surreal, an affront to the screaming chaos inside him. "There's a child. Oh God. There's a child down at Willow Creek Park. I think she's dead. And there's another girl." His voice trailed off, choked with a mixture of terror and nausea. Within minutes, the once peaceful park was transformed into a kaleidoscope of flashing red and blue lights, their harsh strobes cutting through the deepening gloom. Sirens wailed, growing louder and more insistent, tearing through the quiet residential streets of Maplewood, signaling an emergency that would forever scar the town's collective memory. Patrol cars, ambulances, and unmarked detective vehicles converged on the scene, their tires crunching on the gravel path. Uniformed officers, their faces grim and professional, fanned out, their movements swift and precise as they secured the area. Yellow crime scene tape, an ominous barrier against the burgeoning curiosity of the gathering crowd, was quickly erected, transforming the familiar park into a forbidden zone. Sarah Miller, still crouched by the lake, seemed to float above the escalating chaos. When the first officers approached her, their voices firm but cautious, she looked up with eyes that held no recognition, no fear, no understanding. "It's broken," she murmured, her gaze drifting from the approaching uniforms to her own mud-caked hands. "The system is broken. I tried to fix it." She offered no resistance, only a strange, almost ethereal pushback, a weak, almost involuntary flinching as they gently took her arms. It was less an act of defiance and more a manifestation of her being utterly adrift, disconnected from the reality unfolding around her. Her words remained a meaningless litany of errors, repairs, and faulty programming, a chilling insight into a mind lost in its own labyrinthine darkness. Her empty gaze seemed to bore through them, seeing only what her fractured mind dictated. A collective sigh, heavy with sorrow, rippled through the emergency personnel when the paramedics, after a quick somber assessment, delivered the confirmation. Lily Peterson was indeed deceased. The air grew thick with a palpable grief, even among hardened professionals. A small child, gone. The sight of her tiny body, so still and vulnerable beneath the towering oak, was a punch to the gut for everyone present. Officers, their faces etched with a familiar pain they wish they didn't know, worked diligently to keep the gathering onlookers at bay, their voices strained as they instructed the growing crowd to maintain distance. The last thing they needed was a traumatized family arriving to a circus of morbid curiosity. Before this night, the name Lily Peterson resonated with sunshine, laughter, and the bright, unburdened spirit of childhood. She was 7 years old, a whirlwind of boundless energy and innocent curiosity. Her hair, the color of corn silk, kissed by summer sun, bounced around her shoulders when she ran. Her most treasured possessions were a worn, spiral-bound sketchbook and a set of well-chewed colored pencils, her constant companions. Lily's world was one of vibrant hues and endless possibilities, meticulously documented in her drawings. She saw magic in the ordinary. A squirrel burying a nut became a grand adventure. A dandelion's puffball, a wish-granting orb, and every cloud held the potential for a new, fantastical shape. She was the cherished only child of Mark and Emily Peterson, a couple whose life in Maplewood was a testament to quiet contentment. Their two-story colonial, nestled on a tree-lined street, was not grand, but it was a home overflowing with warmth, love, and the joyful chaos that only a child can bring. Mark, an architect with a passion for woodworking, and Emily, a dedicated elementary school teacher, had built a life centered around Lily. Her crayon drawings adorned their fridge, her laughter was the soundtrack to their evenings, and her small, trusting hand in theirs was the anchor of their existence. Willow Creek Park, with its winding paths, tranquil lake, and ancient trees, was Lily's sanctuary, her outdoor studio. She spent countless hours there, sketching the intricate patterns of wildflowers, capturing the mischievous glint in a squirrel's eye, or simply lying on her back, lost in the ever-shifting artistry of the clouds. Every leaf, every pebble, held a story for Lily, and she was always eager to tell it through her art. Just hours before, as the afternoon sun began its gentle descent, painting their living room in warm, golden light, Lily had stood by the back door, her sketchbook clutched tight. "Mommy, can I go to the park?" she had asked, her voice bright with anticipation, her eyes, wide and earnest, fixed on Emily. "I saw a new kind of purple flower yesterday, and I need to draw it before it gets dark." Emily, stirring a pot of pasta sauce for their traditional Friday pizza night, had paused. The scent of simmering tomatoes and herbs filled the cozy kitchen, mingling with the faint smell of Mark's sawdust from his workshop. "All right, sweetheart," Shed replied, drying her hands on a dish towel. "But be back before your dad gets home and starts the pizza dough. We're making your favorite pepperoni and mushroom tonight, remember?" Lily's face lit up, a blinding, innocent smile that Emily would forever replay in her mind. With a quick, light kiss on Emily's cheek, she had bounced out the door. Emily had watched her go, a quiet warmth filling her chest, a mother's contented sigh. Shed turned back to her sauce, humming a tune Lily loved, completely unaware that the soft click of the door closing was the sound of her world cracking open, a prelude to an unimaginable silence. The shrill, insistent ring of the telephone tore through the Peterson home like a banshee's shriek. It was an old landline, rarely used, making its sudden demand for attention all the more jarring. Mark, having just walked in the door, was in the midst of washing the flour from his hands, the telltale sign of his post-work pizza dough ritual. Emily was setting the table, placing Lily's favorite unicorn-themed plate in its usual spot. The happy, domestic hum of their evening abruptly ceased. Mark picked up the receiver, a slight frown creasing his brow. "Peterson residence," he answered, his voice a little gruff, still shaking off the day. Emily watched him, a slight unease beginning to coil in her stomach. Mark's posture stiffened. His face, usually open and warm, began to drain of color. turning to a chalky white. His eyes, initially confused, widened with a dawning horror that made Emily's blood run cold. He didn't speak for a long moment, just listened, the silence on his end more terrifying than any sound. "What is it, Mark?" Emily whispered, her voice barely audible, a premonition of dread tightening her throat. He slowly lowered the phone, his hand trembling so violently he almost dropped it. His gaze, vacant and distant, finally found hers, but it was filled with an anguish so profound it seemed to hollow him out from the inside. "The police," he choked out, his voice hoarse, unrecognizable. They they found Lily. At the park." The world seemed to tilt. Emily felt the floor buckle beneath her feet. "What? No. No. She's fine. She's just drawing. She'll be home any minute for pizza." Her words were a frantic, desperate protest against a reality she refused to acknowledge. But the look in Mark's eyes, the sheer, crushing devastation, told her otherwise. The drive to Willow Creek Park was a blur of frantic denial and mounting terror. Emily clutched Mark's hand so tightly her knuckles were white, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Every passing streetlight seemed to mock their frantic hope, every familiar turn of the road bringing them closer to an abyss. When they finally arrived, the scene was an inferno of flashing lights and official vehicles. The yellow tape, a stark, brutal declaration of tragedy. A small crowd of neighbors, their faces a mixture of shock and pity, stood behind the cordon, whispering, pointing. Emily saw it first, the ancient oak tree, and then the space beneath it. Her breath hitched, a strangled cry escaping her lips. "Lily!" she shrieked, a sound of pure, maternal agony, attempting to surge forward, only to be held back by Mark's suddenly iron grip. She collapsed against him, her legs giving way, her body racked by an unbearable wave of grief that transcended physical pain. Her cries, raw and primal, tore through the cool evening air, echoing the scream David Chen had uttered just moments before. Mark, despite his own collapsing world, tried to be her anchor. Tears, hot and uncontrollable, streamed down his face, blurring the horrific tableau before them. His strength, a facade he had desperately tried to maintain for Emily, crumbled beneath the weight of unimaginable loss. Their world, built on the simple, joyous foundation of their daughter's existence, had not just shattered, it had vaporized into thin air, leaving behind only the cold, bitter emptiness of sorrow. They were eventually led away, gently but firmly, by an officer whose eyes held a deep, empathetic sadness. The journey back to their once happy home was silent, save for Emily's choked sobs and Mark's ragged breaths. Their house, the sanctuary of their lives, now felt alien, cold, oppressive. Lily's half-finished drawing lay on the coffee table, a bright, cheerful depiction of a rainbow-colored unicorn. Her backpack, discarded near the front door earlier that afternoon, held a half-eaten apple and a well-loved teddy bear. The scent of Emily's pizza sauce, which had filled the kitchen with warmth and promise, now felt like a cruel mockery, a ghost of the evening that should have been. The pizza dough, still rising gently on the counter, was a tangible symbol of their shattered future. Emily stumbled into Lily's room. The pastel walls, the collection of stuffed animals, the tiny shoes lying neatly by the bed, each item a painful dagger to her heart. She buried her face in Lily's favorite blanket, inhaling the faint, sweet scent of her daughter, a scent that already felt like a fading memory. "My baby," she wailed. "My beautiful baby." Mark stood in the doorway, his chest heavy with a suffocating weight. He saw Lily everywhere, her infectious smile in the family photos, her triumphant grin after finishing a complex Lego castle, the way she would curl up against him for story time, all of it, now tinged with the unbearable ache of never again. Their home, once vibrant with Lily's laughter, her playful questions, her boundless energy, was now consumed by a profound, terrifying silence. It was a silence that screamed of absence, of a future brutally stolen, of a joy extinguished. The cozy corners, the sunlit windows, the garden where Lily loved to chase butterflies, all now felt barren, haunted by the ghost of a little girl who had left for the park and never came back. The world they had so carefully built, a world filled with warmth and light, had collapsed, leaving them adrift in a vast, terrifying ocean of grief. The sterile hum of the fluorescent lights in the interrogation room was a stark counterpoint to the tempest raging within Sarah Miller's fractured mind, or perhaps the profound stillness that had replaced it. She sat across from Detective Miller, a woman whose seasoned eyes had seen too much, yet whose brow was now furrowed with an unfamiliar blend of frustration and deep unease. Sarah's mud-stained clothes had been replaced by a generic gray jumpsuit, but the emptiness in her gaze remained. "Sarah," Detective Miller began, her voice calm, carefully modulated, "can you tell us again what happened at the park?" Sarah blinked slowly, her head tilted slightly as if listening to a distant, unheard frequency. Her fingers, no longer fumbling with a phone, picked at a loose thread on the jumpsuit. "The system, it was corrupted," she whispered, her voice reedy and thin, a stark contrast to the detective's steady tone. "A glitch in the matrix." Detective Miller exchanged a glance with her partner, Detective Hayes, who stood quietly by the door, arms crossed. Hayes scribbled something in his notepad. They had been at this for hours. Sarah's statements were a labyrinth of non sequiturs, technical jargon twisted into a chilling personal mythology. She spoke of patches and updates, of fixing the anomaly. There was no remorse, no tears, no overt anger, just a profound, unsettling detachment, an almost clinical explanation for an act of unthinkable violence. When asked if she understood why she was here, she simply replied, "To debug the system, to ensure continuity, and the little girl." "Lily," Detective Miller pressed gently, leaning forward slightly. "What about her?" Sarah's eyes, wide and unnervingly clear, met the detective's for a fleeting moment. She wasn't right. Her light was too bright. It burned. It was a distortion. I had to calibrate it, to bring it back to baseline. She gestured vaguely with her hands, as if performing a delicate, unseen operation. She wasn't real, you see. Not like you. Not like the trees. She was a simulation running amok. The detectives had seen plenty of suspects try to feign insanity, but Sarah's performance, if it was one, was disturbingly authentic. Her unwavering conviction, the lack of any discernible emotion other than a vague confusion, the way she seemed to exist in a reality entirely her own, it sent a shiver down Miller's spine. Sarah seemed less like a perpetrator of a heinous crime and more like a victim herself, trapped in a cage of her own making. The usual markers of guilt, fear, defiance, anger, sadness, were absent, replaced by a bewildering blend of disorientation and a strange, almost serene belief that she had simply performed a necessary task. She did not express regret, but rather a perplexing sense of obligation, a duty fulfilled. The initial shock of Lily Peterson's death had barely begun to subside in Maplewood when the official police statement regarding Sarah Miller's medical history hit the airwaves, sending another, different kind of tremor through the community. The revelation was not just shocking, it was profoundly unsettling, forcing people to grapple with a truth far more complex and terrifying than simple malice. Sarah Miller, it turned out, was not just a troubled teenager. Her medical file, now partially unsealed and discussed in hushed tones by legal experts and psychologists on every news channel, painted a harrowing picture. Diagnosed years ago with a severe form of schizoid personality disorder, her journey had been a silent, internal battle against a world that constantly threatened to unravel. Her history included periods of intense hallucinations, where reality blurred into a chaotic stream of distorted images and unsettling voices. She had self-harmed in the past, a desperate attempt to feel something, anything, concrete, when her grip on the tangible world slipped. She had been in and out of outpatient therapy for years. Her parents, a quiet, often overwhelmed couple who had tried their best, struggling to manage a condition that seemed to defy conventional understanding. The details sent a collective shudder through Maplewood. The evil teenager narrative, easy for some to cling to in their grief and anger, suddenly fractured. This wasn't a girl fueled by hate or jealousy. This was a mind in torment, a fragile psyche that had finally splintered. Sarah had harbored profound delusions for years, seeing others as unreal, as simulations, as faulty programming that needed to be fixed. The world, in her eyes, was a grand, flawed system, and she, Sarah, was its unwitting, tormented technician. Her doctors had prescribed medication, tried various therapies, but the insidious whispers and the blurring lines of reality had always found a way back. Withdrawn demeanor. The autopsy results, presented clinically and dispassionately during a closed-door briefing, only amplified the tragedy's bewildering nature. Lily Peterson had died of asphyxiation, suffocated, her tiny body no match for the unexpected, deranged assault. But it was the other detail that truly chilled the investigators. Several small, shallow knife wounds found on Lily's body, inflicted times post-mortem asterisk. When confronted with this, Sarah, in her detached, bewildered state, offered a chilling explanation, or circuits. To understand how the error manifested, there was no personal vendetta, no history of animosity between the two girls. Lily Peterson, a beacon of childhood innocence, had simply crossed paths with Sarah Miller, a girl lost in the dark labyrinth of her own mind. The act of violence was not born of malice, but of madness, a terrifying, unprovoked explosion of a deeply troubled mind, a mind that perceived Lily not as a cherished child, but as an abstract problem to be solved, a glitch to be patched. The sheer, irrational horror of it all underscored the profound tragedy. An innocent life extinguished by an illness no one could fully comprehend or control. Maplewood, a town once defined by its quiet streets, community barbecues, and Friday night football games, now found itself draped in a pall of collective grief. The usual sounds of children playing, lawnmowers, humming, and distant laughter seemed muted, replaced by a pervasive sense of shock and unanswered questions. Every familiar face carried a weight, a shared burden of sorrow and disbelief. Parents hugged their children tighter, a silent, desperate prayer etched on their faces. Fear mingled with the sorrow, fear of the unknown, fear of the fragility of life, fear of the darkness that could lurk even in the brightest corners of their serene town. The idyllic suburban bubble had burst, leaving behind a raw, exposed wound. Yet, from this raw wound, a different kind of strength began to emerge. Maplewood might have been shattered, but it was not broken. The quiet determination to honor Lily, to embrace her memory, became a unifying force. Just days after the tragedy, as dusk settled over Willow Creek Park, hundreds of residents converged, their faces illuminated by the flickering glow of countless candles. Friends, neighbors, even strangers from neighboring towns stood shoulder to shoulder, their silent presence a testament to the community's shared pain and its unwavering support for the Peterson family. Under the ancient oak tree, where Lily's small body had been found, a makeshift memorial bloomed. Piles of vibrant flowers, notes written in shaky handwriting, teddy bears clutched tightly in tiny hands, small, colorful drawings mirroring Lily's own artistic spirit, all laid beneath the tree's gnarled roots. David Chen, the jogger who had discovered the horrifying scene, stood at the edge of the crowd, his face pale and drawn. He held a single white rose, his eyes fixed on the memorial, an unspoken burden of guilt and sorrow heavy on his shoulders. He had tried to help, he had called. But the image of Lily's stillness, of Sarah's vacant stare, haunted his every waking moment. He pledged silently that night to do whatever he could to support the Peterson family, to ensure Lily was never forgotten. The Remember Lily Fund was established almost immediately, a beacon of practical support amidst the emotional chaos. What began as a local initiative quickly garnered national attention, fueled by the heart-wrenching story and the poignant contrast between Lily's vibrant life and Sarah's tormented existence. Donations poured in, not just to help the Peterson family navigate the crushing financial burdens that follow such a tragedy, but also to fund programs aimed at raising awareness about adolescent mental health. The community understood that while Lily's death was an unspeakable crime, Sarah's illness was also a tragedy, one that might have been prevented with earlier, more effective intervention. For Mark and Emily Peterson, the world remained a grayscale landscape, their hearts a constant ache. But amidst the suffocating darkness of their grief, a fierce, desperate resolve began to take root. They refused to let Lily's memory be solely defined by the horror of her death. Lily was light, laughter, and color. That was the story they would tell. Their decision was made during a sleepless night, huddled together in Lily's empty room, surrounded by her untouched toys. She was sunshine, Mark, Emily had whispered, her voice raw. She wouldn't want us to just be sad. She would want us to make things beautiful again. Mark, his eyes still red-rimmed and hollow, nodded, clutching Emily's hand. She loved colors and drawing and making people happy. The memorial service they organized was unlike any Maplewood had ever seen. Instead of somber black and hushed whispers, the community hall was transformed into an explosion of color. Lily's whimsical crayon drawings, carefully framed, adorned every wall. Her favorite songs, cheerful, upbeat tunes about unicorns and rainbows, played softly in the background. Children were encouraged to wear bright colors, to draw their own pictures, to share happy memories of Lily. Emily, her voice trembling but clear, stood before the assembly, Mark's steady hand on her back. She saw magic in every leaf, every butterfly. She was our light, and though a shadow fell, we will not let it consume her memory. We will carry her light forward. Our love for her will not be extinguished by this darkness. It will burn brighter, a testament to the beautiful life she lived, however brief. Mark spoke too, his voice cracking only once as he recalled Lily's infectious giggle, her unwavering optimism. Their message was clear. Lily was a celebration of life, not a mournful symbol of death. From this determination, an ambitious project was born, Lily's Garden. The idea, sparked during a meeting of the Remember Lily Fund, quickly captured the imagination of the entire community. A significant portion of Willow Creek Park, the very place where tragedy had struck, would be transformed. It would become a vibrant memorial, a safe haven, a playground where children could laugh and play freely, a living testament to Lily's joy and innocence. Architects volunteered their time, landscapers donated plants, local businesses contributed materials, and hundreds of residents, from teenagers to grandparents, showed up every weekend, tools in hand, to dig, plant, paint, and build. The once somber corner of the park gradually bloomed. Colorful play structures replaced sterile benches. Wildflowers, chosen for their resilience and vibrant hues, now swayed gently where the ground had once been bare. A winding path, made from smooth river stones, led to a quiet corner shaded by the very oak tree, now surrounded by a ring of brightly painted wooden benches. Each element of Lily's garden was designed to evoke the spirit of Lily herself, a place of wonder, color, and unadulterated happiness. It was a defiant act of hope, a physical manifestation of Maplewood's refusal to surrender to despair, a tangible legacy for the little girl who loved to draw the world in brilliant shades. The legal proceedings that followed were, in many ways, as fraught and complex as the crime itself. After extensive psychological evaluations, Sarah Miller's defense argued for diminished responsibility, citing her profound mental illness. The court wrestled with the difficult nuances of culpability when a mind is so thoroughly unhinged from reality. Ultimately, Sarah Miller pleaded guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. The judge, acknowledging the depths of her illness while still recognizing the irreversible loss of life, sentenced her to a minimum of 5 years before parole consideration to be served in a high-security facility specifically designed for adolescents with severe mental health issues. It was not a conventional prison, but a place where therapy, medication, and structured care were paramount, a recognition that Sarah was not simply a criminal, but a patient in desperate need of profound intervention. The verdict sent ripples of division through Maplewood. For some, the sentence felt like a profound injustice. Lily Peterson's life had been brutally cut short, and a 5-year minimum term felt shockingly lenient, an inadequate measure of justice for such a horrifying act. They cried out for retribution, for Sarah to be held fully accountable, regardless of her mental state. How could a child's life be valued so little? They wondered, their grief twisting into bitter resentment. But for others, particularly those with a deeper understanding of mental health or those who had witnessed Sarah's family's quiet struggles over the years, the verdict was a painful but necessary acknowledgement of a complex truth. They understood that true justice, in this case, was not simply about punishment, but about addressing the root cause of the tragedy. It sparked difficult, uncomfortable conversations about the stigma of mental illness, the cracks in the healthcare system, the fine line between accountability and compassion. The questions lingered, echoing in the quiet corners of the town. How could a society protect its most vulnerable, both the innocent like Lily and the suffering like Sarah, from such devastating collisions? Years drifted by, marked by the changing seasons and the slow, steady hum of life returning to Maplewood. The raw edges of grief had softened for Mark and Emily Peterson, though the ache remained a quiet, constant presence beneath the surface of their daily lives. It was not gone. It would never be. But it had transformed, integrated itself into the fabric of who they were. One warm autumn afternoon, Mark and Emily stood in Lily's garden. The sun dappled through the leaves of the ancient oak, painting shifting patterns on the vibrant playground equipment. Children's laughter, bright and unburdened, floated on the breeze. The very sound that had been so cruelly silenced that terrible evening now resurrected and amplified. A group of preschoolers chased bubbles near the wildflower patch, their squeals of delight a balm to the Petersons' hearts. Emily leaned her head on Mark's shoulder, a wistful smile playing on her lips. She murmured, her gaze following a little girl with bright blonde pigtails who was meticulously sketching a ladybug on a park bench. It was a familiar scene, one that brought both a pang of profound sadness and a wave of gentle comfort. "She's here, Em," Mark replied, his voice soft, his arm tightening around her. "Every flower, every giggle, every splash of color. This is her." He squeezed her hand, a silent promise. Their decision to transform their grief, to channel their despair into something beautiful and enduring, had not erased their pain, but it had given it meaning. Lily's garden was more than just a memorial. It was a testament to love's resilience, a vibrant reminder that even from the ashes of heartbreak, hope could bloom. They had found their solace not in forgetting, but in remembering, in celebrating, in ensuring that Lily's spirit lived on, a source of joy for countless other children. The story of Willow Creek remained a poignant and complex tapestry woven into the history of Maplewood. It was a testament to the devastating loss of innocent childhood, a chilling echo of the inexplicable violence that can erupt from the deepest recesses of a tormented mind. It left behind questions that lingered, unanswered, about the nature of mental illness, the limitations of understanding, and the fragile boundaries of human compassion. Could society, with all its advancements, truly learn to see and reach out to the tormented souls like Sarah Miller before it was too late? Could the early whispers of illness be heard, understood, and treated effectively enough to prevent such unfathomable tragedies from ever unfolding again? The questions hung in the air, a silent, persistent echo across the quiet town, a reminder that there remained so much in the world that humanity had yet to fully comprehend, so many shadows to navigate, so much light to seek even in the deepest, darkest corners. The moon, bruised and pale, still rose over Willow Creek, but its light, forever marked by that tragic night, would always carry the memory of what was lost and the enduring, fragile hope of what could still be saved.